Hi, I'm Tom. I'm continuing to play Satisfactory. I hope this video relaxes you as I share the fun I'm having playing this game. We are now in phase 4, and when I started, I knew immediately that I was going to need more power. I had a couple of coal plants and some turbo fuel, but I knew I would need more. And in phase 4, if I handle it correctly, I knew that I could unlock rocket fuel. But I knew that my power generators took up a lot of space and were large, complex objects in the world. And as a result, clustering them together on the map would probably cause frame rate issues. Also, there's the fact that rocket fuel, my favored fuel for phase 4, is actually a gas. This means that it does not suffer from head lift issues like a fluid does. That means that you don't have to pump it upward in the pipe to keep it moving. Which means that getting it to travel across the map is even easier. So I spaced my power plants far apart. And also, I wanted to make sure that my power plant didn't get in the way of any other aspect of my gameplay, so I wanted the power plant to be generally out of the way. So I placed it on an edge of the map, at the very edge of the swamp on the eastern shore. Although I like trains, none of my power plant inputs for this rocket fuel came by rail. This isolated the inputs, making sure they would not be accidentally disrupted. In the end, I managed to make 100 gigawatts of total power. That is 100,000 megawatts. And I didn't even begin to use it up during the phase 4 part of this playthrough. In fact, I don't think I'll have to make another power plant at all to finish the game. Many people have talked about the fact that in Satisfactory, rocket fuel seems to be quite overpowered, especially when you compare it to, I believe it's called ionic fuel, which is the next step up from rocket fuel, but it's really not that much better, and it costs some very exotic ingredients. And of course, there's nuclear power. And nuclear power is just generally a more complex power system. Plus, it has the real huge downside of being radioactive, and very much the downside that the radioactive elements that you create while making nuclear power cannot be sunk, they cannot be gotten rid of. Some players are happy to build in giant sinks, and by that I mean giant storage facilities that are in a corner of the map, so you never go out there to face the tremendous amount of radiation that results when you pile up all the nuclear waste. And while it is very cool that the design of the nuclear chain in Satisfactory allows you to be clean if you follow through and make sure that you make your waste uranium into plutonium and either sink that, use it again, and then take your waste plutonium and turn it into the next level, which is fixonium, which does burn cleanly. That's neat, but the complexity of plutonium production, and especially fixonium production, and the lack of ultimate power value from those productions means that most players agree that the optimum solution is absolutely rocket fuel, which I have built. I also built some huge factories designed to provide vast amounts of basic items that are common and universal. Say hello to Petroforge Alpha. This huge factory makes all the plastic and rubber this game will probably ever need. And for good measure, it makes circuit boards and petroleum coke. It's possible that I could find a solution that requires more, in which case I can make more. But one thing that I have learned generally in playing Satisfactory is that when I build big factories that produce intermediate items like plastic and rubber or aluminum, items that are designed to be moved by rail to where they're needed, I rarely find that I have not made enough. I often find that I've got too much. So I bet Petroforge Alpha will be all I need for this playthrough. I got started on my train network in Phase 3. And I almost immediately in Phase 4 set out to complete the task of building train tracks that ran in a big loop around the world. In fact, I was very proactive and built almost certainly more train track than I need or will use. It was totally fun to do so, and I certainly like trains. Late in my gameplay of Phase 4, I decided to move my space elevator, and really my central base. It was good to have it where it was, but I ultimately wanted my base to be more centralized and to be artistically more distinct. So I built a huge glass pyramid and relocated the space elevator on top of it. I also put my hub and my various extra buildings like my crafting table and my workbench and my MAM all on top of the pyramid. Because I had a great deal unlocked, I was also able to put a train station in the bottom of the pyramid and hypertube cannons. Now, up to this point in the game, I had not really used hypertube cannons. I used them a lot more earlier in previous playthroughs. But this playthrough seemed to be very train-centric, and it was just very easy, once I had my train tracks set up, to go ahead and create a train and have the train drive me wherever I wanted to be. Maybe it's because I was not in quite such a hurry this playthrough. Trains are great, and they're actually quite fast. But nothing really beats a hypertube cannon, which throws you straight into the air, until the very, very end of the game, when you can get teleporters. And I've never actually built a teleporter before, so I just know that they require a tremendous amount of resources and power. I made 4 hypertube cannons, one pointing in each cardinal direction. And it wasn't actually very hard to tune them to the proper power. I guess I made enough of them to know. But I also set up my pyramid base, generally speaking, at the very center of the map, geographically. And so the hypertube cannons worked really well, got me where I needed to be, and generally speaking, because of all the train tracks I had laid everywhere, it wasn't hard to essentially catch a train back. So after I built the hypertube cannon network, I found I used them as often as I could. The hillside zone north of Blue Crater organically became very congested. It started with a fused modular frame factory built next to a large nitrogen well. But then I kept building, making complex parts, and shipping in components by rail. And I wound up making almost all of the space elevator Phase 4 parts at the Hillside Complex. This did mean, though, that a lot of train traffic ran through that area, and it was rather busy, and there were several times when trains got stuck or collided, and I had to sort it out and straighten out the tracks. This map is light in iron and copper, and I was worried about that. I had certainly chosen the randomized ore and resource mod, so I kind of knew that I would be getting into it. But even so, I certainly was a little concerned about the lack of iron and copper. But when I analyzed all the recipes, that suggested that iron went mostly into a few specific items, namely motors and heavy modular frames, that then became inputs for many other things. So I built dedicated factories for those items. The copper is also special because vast amounts are needed to make the nuclear pasta item, a space elevator part which is also useful in some very advanced production chains. Now, I've seen other Satisfactory videos with very long trains, which I have a hard time understanding. I mean, I think trains are cool and longer trains are cooler, but as you can see in this video, most of the trains I run have only one cargo car, maybe 2, 3 at the most. And in fact, the copper issue was my chance to make some 3-car trains for myself to transport lots of copper. And that worked, and I moved enough copper to build what I needed and to make the nuclear pasta that I need. Maybe not if I move forward with some other crazy designs, but I think I have enough nuclear pasta to get done to get to the end of the game. And I still haven't used up all of the copper on the map. Not to mention, of course, that the way the game works, I have only very recently unlocked Stage 3 or Mark 3 miners. And so my Mark 1 and Mark 2 miners are still on the map, producing less ore per minute. So I could easily go back and use Mark 3 miners to get even more out of the early ore locations that I tapped. So here we are, finishing phase 4. Once again, once I load up all of the required items into the space elevator, I get to pull the handle and see the presentation and get told what a good worker I am and to prepare for phase 5, which I think will probably be pretty fun, but we'll see. There are still things to do at this point, which is to say phase 5 will basically require more complex parts all over. And that's something I've shown that I can do. But I've got the layout. I can do it. And in any case, this is not about stressing to achieve artificial goals, which frankly is the entire structure of the game. This is about relaxing, having a good time watching trains and a very beautiful alien world, and maybe even falling asleep listening to my voice. At any rate, I am very happy that you joined me, and I hope that you'll stick with me for the final phase of the game. In the meantime, I'm also going to publish a longer form video just about my train traveling across my now vast rail network. It too is quite relaxing and enjoyable to watch, and I hope you have fun doing so. Thanks for watching.